Boy, oh boy, did I space. You know what I forgot to do? Right? I'm sure some of you have thought about it, right? And seen some other people do it maybe, but we didn't take a look at the card numbers, right? So obviously, Professor Teklo is number one, right? And then the last card showcased, Biting Thorns, is 83. Okay? So yeah, we can sort of map things out and try to understand who's going to get more cards, who's going to get X amount of cards, and what cards are actually on offer. Now, curiously, so we have this statement. Where is it? It's somewhere here, right? I won't read the whole thing. 400. There we go. Perfect. So featuring over 100 new cards. Over 100 new cards, right? So that's an interesting statement to think about, because does each color variant count? Does each multiple count? I'm going to say each color variant counts, but thankfully, Fabtcg is great enough to do this for us, right? So they have all the placeholders. So 02 to 06 for Professor Teklo. We know the Plasma Blaster goes in there, which has actually been spoiled, I think, on the Reddit. So it's interesting that they've included it. I guess there's no proper art or anything like that, so they haven't done that yet. But we can see each hero, right, and how many cards are left between them. So we can sort of figure out, mainly, the focus for me is on melody, right? To see if there's any more songs, more ways to chain songs, or what other sort of support she might get, right? So what there's, you count the one, right? So it's 6 cards. Did I do that right? 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56. Yeah, 6 cards. Right, so there's 6 cards there. There's 2 cards there, that's 8. And there's 2 cards there, that's 10. So she still has 10, no, plus another 7, right, between her and Ira, right? So we conclude that they are definitely all melody cards. So that is another 17 cards for melody, right? Compared to, why don't we start from the start, right? So Professor has 5, 6, that one's big. 12 plus 1. So I'm gonna write these down, right? Let me do the math and then we'll talk about it. Right, so here's the numbers. The Professor, he has 19 cards left to be spoiled or showcased, right? Then Breverence has 13, then Melody with 17, and Ira with 6 cards left. Now, I'm not including these as Ira's cards. Some of them may be Ira's cards, but I would assume that a lot of these are going to be generics that fit into all the decks, right? So that we can actually get the right amount of cards. Otherwise, we're not quite there, right? For instance, what I say for Melody, she has 17, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 plus 17, yeah, well, 2 copies of each of them. Actually, that's about the right amount. So, yeah, they might be all Ira's, and then Ira has by far the most, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see the majority of new cards. Well, actually, no. Okay, there's another statistic to look at, right? So, the last card, Might, is 105, right? So, there's 105 cards. Now, assuming that this is the last card and there's no other ones, there might be, but we'll say this is the last card. So, 105 cards in total, of which, so far, we have seen 3 cards that are repeats, right? So Bittering Thorns, Copper and Crouching Tiger are all cards we've seen previous, so they are not new cards, therefore they don't fit this over 100, right? Now, over 100, to me, is probably going to be 101. That's the easiest way to think about it. So again, there's 105 cards so far, if Might is the last card, 3 of which are repeats or reprints, right? Leaving 102 cards at the moment to be brand new. Wait, no, sorry, there's 4 cards, because Ira is also a reprint, right? So right now there is 101 new cards to be showcased, right? Which fits that mold of over 100 cards. So as long as every card left to be spoiled is new, which is pretty exciting if you think about it, right? But then that also means that for Melody, she's going to get 17 more new bard specific, or I guess specific generics for her theme, in her allotment here, right? Whereas the Professor is going to get 19. So that is interesting to think about. We know that the weapon is one of them, right? He also needs his basic equipment, the one that starts equipped, which is most likely just going to be some form of the base equipment from Bright Lights, right? So we have the proto-base head, chest, arms, and legs, and then of course we have the special version, the Teklo base, right? Now, seeing as this is coming out first, right? If he had these 4, that would technically still count as the new cards, right? Because they're coming out here before they're coming out in Bright Lights, so it still fits that 101. But I would assume that he has his own variant, because again, I do think they're going to do the whole, there's going to be multiple different variants that you can have equipped. So for instance, this has Blade Break and can be actually used to defend, whereas the token variant has nothing going for it. I'd assume there's some with Arcane Barrier, some with maybe Temper, so that you can keep it around, still equip it. Although, considering this starts at 1, temper would be a bit more powerful, right? There'd be no reason to run this over the one with temper, because temper just means, you know, gets a -1, but you can keep it and then still use it for your deck. So curious about that. I mean, they could tie different effects similar to the frontline gear, where it loses after the first turn or something like that. But yeah, right, so number 2 is his weapon. Then the next 4 are his equipment, which is odd, right? Because that is the wrong number. No, that is perfect. That is 5 cards, right? Right, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 5 cards, right? So we know what those are. Weapon, 4 pieces of equipment, but then he has a few more new abilities, right? Maybe even a token. And then, of course, we have reprints, same as well, right? We see all his equipment, so these are all definitely going to be new cards, or, you know, staple other cards again. There's no wiggle room for them to still meet the over 100, unless Might isn't the last card, but being a token, I mean, there could be other new tokens, you never know. I would assume that, again, excitingly, these are all going to be new cards, right? They're not going to be any previous Guardian cards, which means there's a lot of viability possible for these cards to see play in other Guardian decks or be useful across the board. And all together, I think this is just pumping up the value of getting this. I'm definitely going to get probably 3, 1 to hold on, 2 to open, so I have playsets even for classic constructed, right? But then, Melody, the main thing that I'll talk about, right? We haven't seen her armor, okay? Again, for it to be over 100 cards, her equipment can't be generic equipment, it has to be Bard specific equipment, or, you know, new generic equipment, that's the other go, but I would assume Bard specific. So I'm really interested to see what they do, because again, I think there's a lot of possibility for them to, you know, add stuff to the songs, right? Again, there's enough here already to do a final act deck, right? We're sort of going over this, and I'll continue to go over this and continue to make it as we see more cards. But I definitely think there's going to be a little bit more support for the song aspect, for maybe Copper Generation. And again, right, final act can only get stronger from this point, which is a huge thing to me, because this card is already busted in UPF, right? Off of turn 1, right? You play 1 song, you use Jinglewood even. You get 1 copper, and then a song, you get 5 copper, and then already you can final act for, what is that, like 12 damage, right? If you can find it. So she can be quite, you know, high roller, in all honesty, which is pretty cool. Again, big payoff, big reward for big risk, which is awesome. That's my style of deck, so really excited to see how she plays in UPF. But again, yeah, Final Act just seems like super strong, and a card that definitely will need to be balanced around possibly in the future, because if they just give, you know, ways to find it, tutor it, or ways to, again, extend the use or the generation of other things that allow you to pitch more and draw, bonkers, right? Yeah, so we have, again, her equipment, so that's 4 cards, so that's 51, 52, 53, 54, that leaves 55 and 56 as other attacks, right? Or actions, I should say. So that's pretty interesting. And then, of course, 2 in here will be the same. Now, song-wise, I assume they continue off of this, so either here or here, which is good, right? There's a little leeway, right? There's a little leeway for some more songs to be introduced, which is, again, I think going to increase the usefulness of Final Act, right? I would be interested to see, you know, some maybe red or yellow songs that are actually detrimental rather than beneficial. I think that's sort of the inverse they could do, right? So you have the normal buffing style of Bard, and then you also have the Spy Bard, right? That is usually thrown into a lot of different RPGs. So very interested to see what other cards come out there. Then, of course, Ira, right? So we see Bittering Thorns, right? So again, I assume out of all of them that Ira would have the most reprints. But in saying that, right, again, there's no leeway unless there's more cards. Because at the moment, we already have 4 reprints, right? And again, over 100, not 100 new cards, over 100. So to me, that means there has to be 101 cards at least, right? Which means that every single slot here has to be a new card, which is also super interesting because, again, not only does it buff up Ira, but it buffs up Crouching Tiger Benji, because that seems to be the big theme they're going for. It's going to buff up Katsu, it's going to buff up Ninja in general, and altogether, there's just going to be a lot of cards here, except for Melody, because there's no adult Melody, that could see play in competitive constructive, in competitive blitz, in normal classic constructed, and again, there's just going to be a demand for these cards, which means they can do great things with the cards as promos or extended arts or giveaways or all that, which is another thing we've been sort of discussing, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, altogether, right, going off the card numbers, everything has to be new, and that is super exciting, right, because it means not only do we get Bright Lights, where, you know, it's bound to be a huge set of new cards, and the items are the biggest interest for me, because again, items play off of Melody, play off of Everfest, and, you know, connect the dots, if you will. But we also get 100 new cards here, right? And that's just, yeah, going to be super interesting. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, and yeah, can't wait for the spoilers. I was hoping we'd get some spoilers before Bright Lights, but we are starting the Bright Light spoiler season, so I assume, you know, these all will just be revealed when the decks are released, which is going to be interesting. What's actually in the box. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. See ya.